In 2020, COVID-19, coined the Chinese virus by then President Donald Trump, ignited a rise in Asian hate crimes. There were nearly 3,800 incidences reported over the course of a year during the pandemic, with 68% of those aimed towards women, and over 11% of all incidents involved violent attacks, including the tragic March 16th shootings in Atlanta. The recent wave of anti-Asian discrimination reminds us all of the ugly racism the Asian community has faced throughout America's history. America's first immigration law, the Page Act of 1875, made East Asian women's immigration illegal and barred existing Chinese American women from becoming citizens for fear of temptations for white men. It wasn't until 1943 that those laws were repealed, roughly coinciding with President Roosevelt establishing Japanese American internment camps during World War II. And in the 1980s, the model minority stereotype of Asians was used to place blame on the Black community for failing to escape systemic poverty. As America slowly realizes its need to address white supremacy and systemic racism, Asians and Asian Americans are often left out of the conversation. And even though President Biden vowed to be a president for all Americans in his inaugural address, a lot of hard work and uncomfortable conversations need to happen in order for America to truly be equitable for all. Creating real systemic change is a continuous journey that requires us to always keep taking steps forward, no matter how big or how small. This is the work in progress. According to the Stop AAPI Hate Reporting Center, from March through December of 2020, 8% of Asian hate incidents involved workplace discrimination or refusal of service. I spoke to Emily Chang, CEO of China at McCann Worldgroup, about her experiences navigating her career and what we can do to make things better for the future. What sorts of experiences have you had, just climbing the career ladder as an Asian and as a woman, and how does that play out in your journey?
Yeah, I do think there are some particularly unique challenges. If I look at the way that I grew up in a very Chinese household. Let me pick discipline as an example. My parents were super disciplined. So I played 3 instruments, piano, violin, and flute. I had to practice each instrument 1 hour a day. So it's 3 hours after school. And what I'll say is, to answer your question, when you get to the workplace, that's how you've been trained. That's not what the workplace is like. Nobody is polishing their memos, all night long. They're kind of putting the core idea out and sending it out there in the spirit of collaboration, looking for feedback. I was sitting there getting things perfect. And it took me a couple years as an Asian in the workplace to say, I can let go of some of that discipline or I'm going to kill myself. And then if I go to the other piece, which is as a woman, I would say, yeah, there are unique challenges there too. Let's not pretend there aren't. I think generally, if you see a woman in a suit get off of a bus to go do a store check or to go visit a hotel with 8 men, there are assumptions made. They're not necessarily malicious, but do I get handed things? Yes, I do. I get handed men's blazers. I get handed the agenda for the day. I get handed coffee orders. But I'll also say I don't take it personally and I don't get offended because I don't think people are trying to be mean. I think this is what representation is about. If we are generally the sum of the inputs that we take in, we have to be really careful about what we're taking in. But what does media tell us? Even when we're not being as intentional, we're just watching something because it's fun. Well, if there's a group and there's one woman, probably sometimes more often than not, she's the admin or she's the secretary. So I think we need to actively fight that misrepresentation by creating different narratives, different visuals that people's brains can then assimilate. I think it's also important for us on the receiving end to not respond angrily or defensively. I think there's an opportunity to gently correct. We can help people save face because, by the way, we're going to be working with them. So humiliating them or angering them back is not going to help anybody. I think that's super important, whether we are questioning the way our minds are receiving the information we're seeing. And we should probably ask ourselves, let's not assume she's the secretary. Or we're on the receiving end and we're being handed people's stuff. We can respond generously and say, how do I rise above this and recognize that this is due to an assimilation of things that people have seen and use this as a teachable moment?
I think about, generosity in sort of what most people look at as a battle, right? Like the first sign of offense, I'm going to have to like correct you and humiliate you and do all these things that sort of naturally bubble up. And I think the generosity part and the conscious part of it says like, okay, let me use this as a teachable opportunity in a way that's kind and maybe non-confrontational. How have you found that to play out on a day-to-day basis, or in your own personal journey, with sort of educating people in a moment?
Well, I'll think of a personal example because my daughter was interested to go to the States, having mostly grown up in China. We were there in the middle of what the president of the country referred to as the Kung Flu, which gave her a very different sort of childhood glimpse of America than I had when I was little. And one day I was walking down the street in Seattle with my daughter, and we were speaking in Chinese, and somebody across the street shouted, "Take your blankety Kung Flu back to where you came from." And my daughter looked at me like, what is he talking about? And you kind of pause. And again, like I was thinking, first pause, always pause. And then what is the right reaction here? My first reaction is to protect my kid, is to put her on the other side of the street and just keep walking. But what is that teaching her, right? How are we being intentional in this moment to extract the maximum value for everybody involved? I called back out across the street. I said, "Sir, is there something we've done to offend you?" And he said, "Oh, no, you're one of us. You're cool." And then again, okay, is that a good conclusion? Should I walk on, or is there more that we should do? So I thought, I'm probably not going to teach him. I'm not going to change this grown up, but maybe he'll think again before he says something again to a stranger. And definitely my daughter will understand how we represent ourselves. So I kind of said back to him, I said, "Well, I'm glad you don't have a problem with us, but maybe, it's worth just getting to know somebody a little more before you assume where they're coming from." And I kind of said it quietly and gently with a smile. And he said, yeah, you're right. And he walked on. And it could have ended a number of different ways. So sometimes you have to be a little brave and say, I'm going to go see where this takes me. But I do feel like it left an impression with my kid. And maybe, hopefully it left a little bit of an impression with him.
Asian Americans are the fastest growing racial or ethnic minority group in the United States, according to a new report from the Pew Research Center. Between the years 2000 and 2019, the Asian population grew 81% compared to 70% among Hispanic Americans and just 20% among Black Americans. And the purchasing power of Asian Americans is expected to be $1.3 trillion by 2023, according to Nielsen. Peter Pham, co-founder and partner at Science Inc., a venture capital firm and startup incubator, knows firsthand how important diversity is when it comes to business. From a VC perspective, how has science, attacked the issues of diversity and equality in the founder community?
I like to say we have receipts. So of our $75 million fund that we've already deployed, 65% of those dollars went to founders of women, people of color, minorities. So we do it by putting our money where our mouth is. For myself, a lot of empathy of where I grew up. I grew up in LA in a neighborhood that was mostly Hispanic, actually. I stood out, but throughout my life, of course, whether it's elementary school through high school and college, there's always these moments where it's clear that I'm the odd man out of the group. I see it, unfortunately, for sure, for Black founders, women founders, investors. And I definitely make the effort to help them, actually, as much as I see it.
How did not seeing other Asians as you were coming up affect your perspective on the business and the industry?
Motivating. I think, when one of my first startups was 15 years ago, Photo Bucket. I remember raising money for that and didn't really know any investors. And Gus Tai from Trinity Ventures was our lead investor, one of the only Asians that I knew back then. He actually funded my second startup, Bill Shrink. Both companies we sold made the firm money. And I think for me, it's motivating, right, to show that, hey, like we can do this too. And seeing others out there successful and having, obviously representation both of women, but also for Asians, for myself, somebody looking up to, it's inspiring. We are always trying to, I think, goes all the way back, right? We're always trying to win. We always got to get that straight A's, and seeing others succeed is just amazing.
I love the fact that you said, not saying others like you was motivating. And you took it, and not from a place of anger, which I think anger is also a correct response, but more from a place of like, oh, if I can do this, imagine what the possibilities are, for others like me and or just for your own success. Tell me a little bit about that sort of perspective, and if that even resonates with you.
100%. I think there's this ideology of, you are what you think you can become. Growing up as a kid, you recognize it. Well, all the Asians I know, my parents know, they're all doctors. So I guess we're supposed to be doctors. And so I think careers and things, whether you're a astronauts, right, or doctor or tech executive or investor, seeing people like you, as a child and growing up, it's inspiring. Like, you are the average of your friends, and if your friends are all look like you and all your friends do one thing, that's kind of what you become. I think we're all kind of ingrained and used to that. For me, watching other Asians succeed, kind of rah-rah, and there's a circle of tech Asians that we talk and say, I'm so glad there's an Asian there. And I look at the tech CEOs in startups today, right? We have Eric Wu from Open Door, Eric Guan from Zoom. You have let's see, Tony Su from DoorDash, James Park from Fitbit. There's a few. There's very, very few that are still leading companies. You have Katrina Stitch Fix, who just stepped down from being CEO of Stitch Fix. You have Debbie Su from OpenTable. That's the list. It's not an extensive list. And so I'm always looking and rooting for seeing some of those successes.
I wonder, when you mentioned like sort of how your own sort of support has gone in large part to some degree to Black founders and women founders, in the light of recent Asian hate, how have some of your learnings from helping others been applied to what we're experiencing now with Asian hate crimes?
Having and seeing the violence, it hits home, right? Like I've been beat up. I've got fights and scraps younger because I'm Asian. I've been there. I've been called the names and stood up for my friends and got in trouble for these things. And I think that it's nice to see the allies. I think we talk about this all the time in the founders, my Black founders and my investors that have being an ally. I think Asian Americans never felt like we had that. We never asked. I think there's always this, we never asked for the help, right? This is part of the culture. But to have the allies out there saying, look, we'll stand up for you and we will help. And, that is wrong. That's nice to see. And the impact, I think it's real. I'm very hopeful that we all kind of recognize that it's always been there. But I think as Asians, we've never really made the noise, right? I think it's part of our culture to, just kind of just be quiet and sit back and, don't complain, just do the thing. But it's not about complaining. It's about demanding, right, respect and really, whether it's your career, just asking for the spot that you deserve to be in as you earn it. And for those around Asian hate, it's kind of important to see that it impacts all of us. Yeah.
In light of that, like, how often do you support your founders in like the emotional intelligence, especially for the diverse groups, right? Like, we do sort of tend to accept what's given to us and not necessarily like command or demand what we think we're worth. And it is rooted in some sort of history and how you were raised and, cultural traditions and things like that. But there's an undoing that happens along the way. Is there any sort of soft coaching that goes into the founders that you work with?
An example is putting people on their heels a bit and recognizing that, for my startups, if they're raising capital, for example, asking the investor, have you invested? How many women have you invested? How many Black founders have you invested? What is the diversity of the firm or where your dollars are put? And it's just to level set and remind people that, hey, I should think about this more in the context of things. So I would say having most of my founders who have lots of diversity is just be a little bit more aggressive in reminding people that they're probably not recognizing that their homogeneous network investment portfolio patterns are there, and that they should be a little bit more open-minded and give these founders a little bit more of a chance to explain themselves. But I think it's important to give the opportunity and a little bit of patience, because that network isn't really there to help a lot of folks along the way that they just didn't know.
And patience is exactly what it's going to take. Rectifying centuries of injustices isn't going to happen overnight. Now I'm so glad to have you both here at the same time. Corporate America, the startup ecosystem, two amazing minds gathered in one space. Both of you spoke on this as in terms of being younger Asians in America at some point, and this idea of perfection and some of the things that come up as sort of cultural touch points that you have in the back of your mind as you operate. How do you advise younger generations that are kind of falling into the same career path and or pattern?
Asians on television, right? Asians in movies, all of these things, it's great. I think our generation and the next is going to benefit from seeing more exposure. I think both Blacks, women, Asians, we're all having the moments for however we stand in terms of the things that we've been insidiously been pushed against. I'm really optimistic that all these things are coming to an end someday.
Emily, same question.
I think speak up. I do think the younger people today are in a very different context than we were when we were young. So that helps. And sometimes you don't know still when to speak up, when to ask questions. So find a mentor. I mean, I'm just being really practical here. Find somebody you can ask questions to that are not in a position to judge you or evaluate you in a workplace environment. Somebody you can say, is this appropriate? Is it okay to ask about this? Is it okay to push back on this? And sometimes it is. And sometimes, you might hear the advice, it's better not to for now. I think be intentional. Embrace diversity as a theory, not a number. Diversity is not about not seeing differences or not recognizing differences. It's not about equality. It's about equity, right? So how can we each move with intention, knowing I've been hired into this job because of who I am, not how do I fit into this corporate culture and become more like them? There's this quote Singleton and I talk about, which is diversity is being invited to the dance, inclusion is being asked to dance, and belonging is feeling like you can dance like no one's watching. And I think our jobs as leaders and as people who are either supporting, working alongside, or as young Asians, how do we feel that we can dance like no one's watching? And that it's only when everyone is dancing that we know we've been successful.
I think allyship, especially between and among multiple groups of minorities and marginalized people, is super, super important, to be part of the same fight and be in it together and realize like your journey is similar to mine. It may not be exactly the same, but we are headed in the same direction is super, super important. And it's an important part of the puzzle. I think the way that Emily approached her own personal experiences with racism is very smart and different and empowering. I think if we all sort of took that pause in a moment to say, like, how can I educate and use this as a teachable moment versus, maybe the knee-jerk reaction of getting angry, which is also correct, you can see a lot more progress and results in society.